have an incredible team of folks that I work with aligned values. You can really do good to people, create great communities, respect tenants, and still make a great return and a great profit for investors.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today on the Gentle Art of Crushing It show, where we focus on learning and sharing with our listeners all there is to know about how to create success in our lives. This show stands on the shoulders of giants. Our mission is to empower and inspire our listeners to create the life of their dreams whilst having a blast in the process. Let's celebrate life together. Welcome to the show.
All right, welcome back to the Gentle Art of Crushing It podcast, Passive Investing Edition. My name's Randy Smith, and I am your host today. And I am just really excited to have Amy Sylvis on with us today. Amy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Randy. This is really exciting. I appreciate you having me.
Outstanding. Well, Amy is the principal of Sylvis Capital, and she is an educator and an inspirer of her own right. And she also was a pretty heavy passive investor in the past. But Amy, can you kind of walk us through a little bit about your background and your past and how you came to be where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks again, Randy. So I'm out here in Los Angeles, California, born and raised, one of the only natives. No, there are native people out here, but lived here for all of my 42 years of life with my husband, Joel. And as you mentioned, I used to be a passive investor in multifamily real estate while I worked in biotech. Biotech is that industry has a strong place in my heart as I've had some health challenges in the past myself. And yeah, I loved the industry. I have a ton of passion. I still do for helping people that have health struggles. But I found myself in a place in my early 30s where I needed to make sure I didn't have to trade my time for money any longer. And part of that process involved finding these amazing real estate syndications to passively invest in, and then eventually going to the active side and now doing my own syndications.
Fantastic. So I know you're you've been very open with some of the challenges you had in your early 30s, and that's a big part of your story. Are you comfortable sharing a little bit with the audience today? Okay.
Appreciate you asking. I'm an open book. Yes, absolutely. You want me to tell a little bit more? Great.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
So I was born with a genetic illness called cystic fibrosis. I find that many people have heard of it, but don't necessarily know what that is. But basically, when I was born in 1981, my parents were told that I'd live to be maybe around 8 or 9 years old because I have this genetic condition. They didn't know that they were carriers or they passed it on to me, but I have this genetic condition that made my lungs deteriorate, sometimes slowly, sometimes rapidly over time, with very virulent lung infections. So I'd be in and out of the hospital. And you could imagine what that type of prognosis and, the self-care I have to do at home and all of those things presented a pretty big challenge, as thankfully I lived longer than expected. But in my 20s and 30s, I was in the hospital a lot more than I wanted to. And to hold down a job, it's tough to be absent that much and have an employer say, hey, yeah, I'm totally cool with you being gone months and months out of the year. So again, thankfully, my health has been not as bad as the doctors predicted. And a miracle medication came to the market about 4 years ago for cystic fibrosis. But this is a big motivator for me to figure out how to not be dependent on my family. They would kill me if they heard me saying that, but I didn't want to be a burden. They did so much to raise me and care for me. So finding out this concept of passive income, which I wasn't raised with, I come from a very, just typical middle-class family. It was really a key to be able to give myself that security and safety that trading my time for money wasn't able to give me.
Wow. What a powerful story. And what a journey that is, not only for yourself, but for your family and your loved ones. Gosh, that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Are you interested in real estate investing but don't know where to get started or think you don't have the time or money? Are you stuck in your W-2 because the golden handcuffs make it hard to walk away? If this sounds like you, check out impactequity.net and schedule some time to talk with the founder, Randy Smith. Randy went from massive income to leaving his W-2 through passive income, and he can help you do the same. www.impactequity.net.
So you got to this point though in your I mean, if you worked in biotech, obviously you're a very, very bright person. I know that from watching you all over social media.
Oh.
But you did fairly well in the biotech space, or very well, I guess. You reached this point though, where at a fairly early age, you started searching for passive investment opportunities to kind of like, I use this term, decrease your dependence on your W-2, but essentially try to decrease your dependence on any type of income so you could actually go out there and live, a fruitful life without being worried about having to call in sick to work all the time. So what did those early years look like? How did you find the space? What kind of drove you? Like, I think in my early 30s, I had no idea this even existed. I'm curious how you found all of this. Yeah.
Gosh, it was really fortuitous, whether you believe in God or the universe or, whatever you'd like to call it. I was really, again, the only thing I knew was trading my time for money and working for just a traditional employer. So I found myself in my mid-20s, again, hoping to solve this equation of, I can't work, how am I going to pay my bills? So I got an MBA thinking, I'll just get a bigger, badder W-2, stockpile more cash, and hope that cash lasts for however long I needed it to work. So I will never forget, a few months after graduating from my MBA, I was at the Santa Monica Library and stumbled upon this purple book that I think a lot of us have heard, called Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Sure.
And my head exploded. I could not believe that something like that existed. So it was really the process of having having a problem, searching for many, many answers, not finding it, and then really stumbling upon it in my early 30s, and I was off to the races once I discovered what the solution was to this very big problem of income.
I love it. Yeah. And, that book gets referenced. It was a big part in my story as well.
Yeah.
It is in probably 90% of the people that I have on the show, but I've never even asked this question, but I'm curious, can you share what it was in that book that just kind of blew your mind, that shifted the mindset? Because some listeners, believe it or not, might not have ever heard of the Purple Book or seen it.
Yes.
What was your big takeaway with that?
Sure. Well, I think one of the very first things, Robert, if I remember correctly, it's been a while since I read the book, but this concept of the rich don't work for money. And granted, I wasn't necessarily looking to become rich. I just wanted to cover my basic expenses. But this mindset shift of, there is such thing as purchasing an asset and the asset generating cash flow, and you can live off of the cash flow, as opposed to, I have to show up and physically be in a space. This is before COVID. There wasn't even work from home, right? I had to show up to an actual office. And because of that time, then I'd receive money back. Disconnecting and decoupling earning from time spent was just something I didn't even knew existed or was possible. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, but lots of mindset changes that book provided.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great answer, and I believe that's one of the things. It's been so many years since I've read the book. I need to go back and read it again because I talk about it all the time. But yeah, just this idea that we're taught from a very young age, you go out, you get an education, you work really, really hard, you're going to get a great W-2 job that you can take your 2 weeks vacation for the rest of your life. And then if you're lucky, you retire and you're wealthy at 65, right? And there's this other way that, we see entrepreneurs doing it all the time. But in my mind, I always looked at entrepreneurs and I was like, I thought they were crazy. In my work, I worked very closely with entrepreneurs, and I'm like, these guys are working 60, 70 hours a week and they're not making as much money as I am. Like, why are they doing this? But yes, that book opened up and kind of cracked the shell and kind of brought me to the other side as well. So.
Right. Yeah, it is pretty wild living just as a person, knowing that there are other thoughts and ideas that circulate amongst other humans that we just haven't heard, don't understand, aren't even part of our mindset. So it really opened up my mind to, hey, what else is out there that I haven't been exposed to, that I don't understand? There are these life hacks, to put it kind of, colloquially, that can make life so much better.
I love it. Yeah, no, and I think just that simple shift of knowing that you don't know is such a big shift, because we go from an early age thinking we know everything. And I joke with people, like, I never knew as much as I knew at 20 years old. Every since
that.
then, I have become dumber and dumber and dumber. Like, I just realized there is so much out there that I don't know.
Yes.
Well, that's interesting. So, okay, so you read the Purple Book. You had this shift, you had this awakening, so to speak, and
Yes.
you started looking down these other paths. And the interesting thing with Rich Dad Poor Dad is it doesn't say go out and do X, Y, and Z. It just kind of opens. It's like you're standing on the edge of the Grand Canyon and looking out at all the opportunities. So, how do you find passive investing from there? Like, what happened?
Yes. What a great analogy. I'm picturing myself sitting out on the edge of the Grand Canyon. I think that's perfect. I think I had the book sparked this insatiable desire to continue to learn more, like I alluded to, of, hey, what else is out there that I don't know and I don't understand? And Robert's done such a great book with such a great job with his books and branding that, I stumbled upon Ken McElroy, who wrote the ABCs of Real Estate, and Tom Wheelwright that talked about tax-free wealth. And I just was consuming voraciously all of these books and these concepts that it became very clear to me that investing in real estate and generating that passive income was going to be the solution to how I wanted to design my life and support myself. So yeah, I just went kind of down the line of all the books that he published within his Rich Dad Advisor series. And it just all made sense and fell into place for me mentally.
Love it. I love it.
Yeah.
So you made your first passive investment. What did that process look like? And well, maybe just tell me a little bit about your passive investing journey, if you could. Yeah.
Sure. So I actually wanted to be an active investor from the get-go. Naive little me. Living out in Los Angeles, I did what every Californian does. There's a reason why they call it stupid California money, right? I don't mind admitting it. I went to Phoenix. I went to Vegas. No one wants to invest in California. California's, crazy high prices, rent control, regulations. No, thank you. But I really found it extremely challenging because I didn't understand. There was so much education I didn't get before trying to buy my first quadplex in Phoenix, Arizona. And I just kept trying to make these deals work, to underwrite. Thank goodness they didn't work because I really had no idea what I was doing.
Yeah.
And then my health kept getting in the way. So I was managing this full-time job of managing cystic fibrosis. I still was working in biotech full-time. And then I was trying to do this side hustle of investing. And my health, sadly, just kept getting worse and worse. And I had to come to terms with myself of, hey, this isn't working. I still want to go down this journey, but running my own deals, finding my own deals, operating them isn't going to work. What's the next best thing? And through going to conferences, Dave Lindahl was the group that I decided to join. I met a bunch of amazing active syndicators that I got to know and decided to passively invest with them while my health, wasn't quite where I wanted it to be quite yet.
Awesome. So you invested in a handful of deals or a couple of deals, or what did that look like?
Yeah,
Okay.
invested in about 4, all outside of California, thank goodness.
Okay.
With 2 separate operators. And it ended up being so fortuitous, as most things do in life. You see a stop sign of like, oh, I really want to do this. It's not working. Ended up being really, really smart that I got to know these operators, see what they were doing, understand what good looked like. I got this incredible education in addition to a few other things I was doing by being that passive investor in Tennessee with 4 different deals over about a 6-7 year period of time.
Got it. Okay. So you got to see firsthand the power of passive investing. You got to start to learn the business as well. And these were people that you were kind of sitting alongside of in the coaching program, I'm guessing. So you got to really know them as well.
Exactly.
Interesting. Yeah, it's a different path. You don't hear a lot of people that go down that path. They're either passive investors, active investors, or transition in those. So, okay. So you ended up doing that for 5 or 6 years. You got to see the fruits of your labors of those investments, all while continuing to learn. And then at some point, you make the decision that you're going active now. Maybe we saw a shift in the health, or we saw something change that caused you to jump in. So what was that turning point?
Sure. 2017, at 35 years old, I was forced to medically retire. The thing that I'd always feared, I didn't ever want to have happen, that I was really terrified of. My hand was forced, and I had to go on Social Security disability, kind of lick my wounds, leave this amazing biotech career that I was so passionate about and loved. Thankfully, the one kind of silver lining was we saw, drug development takes about 10 years. So we saw on the horizon this drug that if all the tests played out and the FDA, thought it was safe, was going to be approved in a few years. So from 2017 to 2019, I just did my best to, while I was medically retired, to just read, continue my education. Then the drug finally came out right before COVID at the end of 2019. And I was off to the races. I had laid all the groundwork over what totaled to be about 10 years. I had the experience, I had the connections, and I had all the time in the world. As you could imagine, having a lung condition, which this drug doesn't cure, I wasn't really eager to be out and about to get COVID. So as I was hermetically sealed in my house, I had the health, I had the time, off to the races.
Wow. What a story. Okay. That's amazing. I mean, what are the odds, first of all?
Right.
And yeah, certainly there's something else that's involved that's kind of moving these chess pieces that just the stars all align and you're ready to take off just at the most, I don't know if it's opportune or inopportune, whatever the situation was, but clearly it's all worked out because you've done amazing. Since that point, you've absolutely exploded and you're so well respected in the space and your network is huge. I've never heard a negative thing about you. So it's just amazing. So tell us since 2019 and you jumped in and you went, tell the audience, what has it been? What have you done? Where are you at? What's the business look like today?
Yes. So we've acquired a handful of multifamily and flex industrial units and properties throughout the Southeast and the Midwest. I have an incredible team of folks that I work with aligned values. That's a big principle upon which I act. I firmly believe, some call me Pollyanna, but I've seen it live out. You can really do good to people, create great communities, respect tenants, and still make a great return and a great profit for investors. So it's been an incredibly fulfilling experience. Similar to biotech, I just love being able to know that I make a difference. I'm not shying away from money. Money's great. It helps a lot of things, but making sure we're also making a great impact has been so fortuitous. So we're building the empire and we're going to make sure the empire does good.
That is such a great point. That's such a great point. And there are a lot of people out in this space they're in it for the money. They're chasing the money, and you hear all the horror stories about evictions and people's rent getting doubled and all of those types of things that happen. And it's just really good to hear that there are more and more folks, as I'm finding out, that are just creating amazing communities that really value their community members. And it truly is a win-win. So now, you mentioned in that, though, a team, and teams don't happen overnight. It takes a lot of work. So how did you develop this team, or how did you curate this team that you have today?
Yes, I love that you bring up team, because I have to be honest, as an only child that's always been very focused on, what can I do? How can I make this happen? This concept of real estate investing being a team sport, I was a little bit late to the game on. Thank goodness I eventually got the lesson, but they were actually the folks that two of the deals I passively invested with. I ended up getting to know them so well. And I just continued to show up, add value without any expectation of anything in return, get to know them. I eventually became business partners with them. So many people may have heard of Quattro Capital, Maurice Philogene, Aaron Hudson. They are just one of my business partners. I'm not a part of Quattro, but I partner with them. And yes, they were some of the first people that I did deals with. And it's been an incredible experience. I've continued to network. I know you and I are both on LinkedIn. We attend meetups. There are so many incredible people in this space. And I take a long time. I slowly develop relationships because trust, is something that takes some time. But just intentionally networking and being around in this space helps me find incredible business partners that I love working with.
Yeah, I love that you say that it takes time. And I think, there are a lot of folks in this space that they want to have a quick 15-minute phone call and then jump into a partnership. And I'm always just baffled by that. And I think it's because I've seen teams formed quickly that fail quickly as well. But this is a long-term play. Like, you are getting married for probably 4 to 6 years if you're doing a
Yes.
multifamily deal at a minimum, and if you
Yes.
end up doing multiple deals, we're talking a decade. So, I like to always say that I will meet and get to know people, and then I like to sit on the sidelines and watch. So
Yes.
I'm curious, what do you do? Like, how do you approach that when people come to you and are looking for partnerships to happen quickly?
It is so hard. I'm going to be honest, Randy. It really is. Because I understand the struggle, right? We've all been new. We've all been, eager
Yeah.
to figure out how to jump in the space, how to form partnerships, especially with people that are established in the industry and that have a track record. So that always gets me in the heart. But yeah, I think the best way is to be very upfront and honest about my principles and really how I do things. Of, hey, this is the first conversation of hopefully very, very many over several years. That's just how I get to know folks and build relationships. So, and that doesn't work for some people and it works for others, and that's perfectly fine. There's no judgment. But
Yeah.
when I tell my investors, hey, this is my business partner, this is why we chose this deal, I want to be able to be completely honest and upfront about how I cultivated this relationship, what I want to know about them. Investors work extremely hard for these funds and are entrusting us to be good stewards of their money. So I just want to be able to make sure I can say everything with the utmost integrity and honesty. So
Yeah.
that's how I lead when I'm asked about
No,
partnerships.
I love it, and I think we have very similar belief systems in that area
Yes,
as well. And
I
you
believe it.
mentioned the word stewardship, which I
Mm,
think is I believe at the individual level, we're all stewards of what's given to us. And
yes,
I'm of the belief that if we are good stewards, then we have a tendency to be blessed with more to be good stewards of, whether that be
yes,
time, friends, family, money, health, whatever that is, right?
yes.
I'm curious, not to dig too deep into that, but I'm curious,
That's
what are
good.
your thoughts about stewardship? Because I think it's such an important piece.
I couldn't agree more. I happen to be a Christian. Hopefully, that's okay to talk about here. And
Absolutely.
I,
Yeah, absolutely.
um, and so everything is God's money. It's not my money. And if I'm blessed enough, as you mentioned, to be allowed to take care of, allocate, cultivate, all of these things when it comes to money, whether it's my own through money that I've earned or my investors, I really think of it as something very precious that I've been entrusted to take care of and grow and all of those things. So I take it extremely seriously. And the concept of, and some people may have a different point of view, but my own money is one thing, but somebody else's that they
Hmm.
entrust, there is a level of just care and tending to that holds a lot of weight for me, and that I feel very fortunate to be able to grow and take care of. So that's how I view every single dollar that I've given. I think very often about the hard work that has gone into every dollar that is invested alongside of me and what that means. And
Yeah.
not in a negative way, but I really do feel the gravity of it as I make decisions and develop relationships and choose investments and all of those things. Hopefully that
Yeah, I
makes
love
sense.
it. No, it absolutely does. And thank you for going with me on that one and talking a little bit more about that. I think it's important in that the point that you mentioned about like I will invest more, not I won't say carelessly, but um, I will invest with my own dollars before I will ever consider investing with my investor dollars because it is so important. Like once that trust is broken, or if that trust is ever broken, it's gone forever, and it'll never be regained. So it's so important for us to be focused on that core goal of don't lose investor capital, and then let's do everything we can to provide just excellent conservative returns. So.
Yes.
Um, so with that though, you have to become an expert at this space. You've got to be an expert at markets. You got to be an expert at business plans. So I'd love if we can to shift like, how do you become an expert or how do you find good markets? And as a prelude, we're going to talk about business plans afterwards and maybe asset classes as well. So let's focus on markets for a bit.
Sure.
What makes you choose a market?
Oh, market research is so much fun. I love this. And especially living in California, I don't feel like I have the luxury to invest in my own backyard. So it is so fun to put on my Detective Amy hat and look throughout the country to understand where are jobs growing, where are incomes rising, where are folks migrating? A lot of folks leaving California, where are they going?
Yeah.
All of this. And where are there local and state laws that are amenable to investors? We want to be good to tenants, but we also want to make sure our business plan as investors can be viable as well. So I am constantly reading the news, going to various websites that show statistics. Even U-Haul publishes great information about where folks are moving. So there are definitely many data points that, intuitively we can understand would drive demand for apartment units. And I think we're different in that in some respect, because we're not looking for a market where there's supply constraint necessarily. And we can just go in, and because no one has a choice to where to live, we can just jack up the rents and they just have to deal with it. We want to find a market where incomes are rising and tenants are begging for nicer finishes. They're eager to hand over, maybe a few $100s a month because they can afford it. They're prospering. They're doing well financially. Again, aligning interests between ourselves and our residents. So it takes a bit of time to do this market research, but gosh, is it so much fun when you find a great market, maybe something that no one's heard about, like Evansville, Indiana, where we are. And you get to see your business plan play out, and the residents are just ecstatic with what you're doing.
Okay, so you, and not that we got to jump into the weeds, but you said Evansville, yes. Indiana.
Yes.
So I have primarily been a Sunbelt investor.
Okay.
But after getting laid off last year, I became a cash flow investor. And we all know, or maybe we don't all know, but common knowledge in this space is that Midwest markets will have generally better cash flow. So is that true? And are you finding that in Evansville, I think you said, Indiana?
Yes. It's actually the third largest city in the state of Indiana, behind Indianapolis and Fort Wayne. So if you haven't heard of it,
okay.
it's in the southwest quarter of the state.
Good to know.
Yeah. Yes. No, cash flow is great, but there's also great demand. This market in particular has great job growth. The local and state governments are investing in a lot of infrastructure, and residents are begging for B+, A- type finishes. So cash flow is great. Appreciation is also fantastic. I mean, a lot of it depends, of course, on the cost basis in which you buy. We got a great deal and all of those things. But yeah, I think the Midwest is, and I'm guilty living out in California, like Indiana, where? Yeah. But there are a lot of great hidden treasures there in the Midwest that I think provide great opportunities for investors.
I love it. Yeah. So demographic trends and what's, I'm trying to think of what they call, these are not major MSAs. These are ancillary markets or tertiary markets.
Yes.
Can be a really, really strong place. Now, is that a market that's geographically close to one of the large major MSAs? Or I guess you're saying it is one of the largest in the state anyways. So, okay.
Yeah, it is. I would consider it a somewhat of a submarket of Indy. It's about an hour and a half, 2 hours outside, but there's I mentioned government infrastructure investment. They're building a major highway in between the two cities, which is going to further, connect the two. One of the great hints of, when you're looking for a market to invest in, where's the path of progress? Where is investment being made? So yeah, definitely I would consider it adjacent to Indianapolis, but not quite there.
Okay, very good. Yeah, thanks for walking through that too, because I have not done a lot of research on Midwest markets. I have a number of investors actually in Indiana, oddly enough. My wife's family is from there, and I know I need to be spending more time there. So that's interesting. Thank you for that. But I think the demographic trends that you talked about, whether it be population or income, like we want to be investing in markets where people can afford not only what we're buying, but can afford what we're trying to do with this business plan. So if we're taking rents to a level that are going to exceed 30% of what their household income is, like odds are that's not going to work in the long run. You might be able to hit your occupancy quickly, but in the long run, you're going to have challenges if that's what you're running into. So I'm glad you're looking at those same things, and your investors, I'm sure, are happy with the returns that you're getting in those types of markets. So
without a doubt.
Let's talk a little bit about asset classes if we can, because I think you're in multifamily, but you're also in some other asset classes as well. Is that correct?
Yes, flex industrial.
So talk about that if you can. So industrial is thrown around a lot. I like the industrial condo space, but what is meant by flex industrial?
Yes, yes. So we can all think of industrial, whether it's warehousing, manufacturing, simply storage. But there's also a component where there's office space, where we can see, a little bit of an office demographic within inside the industrial building. So it sounds a lot fancier, maybe more complex than what it actually is. But
Okay.
what we own is, just the kind of a storage facility where some manufacturing occurs as well. And then there's some office space.
That makes sense. So like
Yes.
every one of the trades has a spot where there's an office up front and they keep their trucks, their supplies, their materials, their
Yes.
warehousing, all of that stuff in the back. So, okay, interesting. And I call it condos, like industrial condos, because quite often
Oh,
they're side by side. And here in
yes.
Phoenix, they're actually sold individually, or you can buy, of course, the full complex as well. So,
Interesting.
yeah. I like the space. And obviously, we're hearing a lot of trends about deglobalization. So we're seeing a lot of those jobs coming back
Yeah.
to the States. So I think industrial and warehousing is going to become more and more important as we see this trend continue. So yeah, very interesting. Okay.
Spot on. Yeah. Onshoring, nearshoring, all of those fun terms. You're spot on.
Yeah. Well, very cool. So, gosh, here we are, 30 minutes. I say that on almost every single podcast, but I do like to limit it to be respectful of everybody's time. But I'd love, if you can you share anything else that you'd like to share with the audience that we didn't have a chance to cover? Of course, I want you to be able to promote whatever you'd like to promote. Tell us about your business and, how folks contact you, those types of things.
Sure. I think if I could give unsolicited advice, it would be to keep, up on everyone's personal financial education. There's so much out there in terms of podcasts, books. I think what we discussed is just a small snippet of, what's available. I think people really have a much greater opportunity than they realize to customize the lives that they want to live. Unfortunately, school and, maybe society doesn't teach us that. But if I can do it, anyone can do it. And I just want to make sure to encourage folks.
I love it. Thank you for that. And you can tell you have an education heart as well, and a desire to help educate and inspire folks. So thank you. That really fits in line with what we're doing here as well. So thank you for the alignment that occurred there. So
Yeah.
I would like, if we can, I do have a few questions that I like to ask everybody at the end of the podcast.
Yes.
So, the question is coming about favorite educational resource. You talked about being sure to become financially literate and educated, but what type of educational resources would you suggest for the listeners?
I think books on tape are one of the most powerful things out there. I don't know if that's specific enough. Let me know. But whether you're like me and you're in your car driving or you're doing dishes, exercising, there are so many ways you can listen to audiobooks. Even if you're not quite an audio learner, you can still spend this, I think, what is called found time, really pouring into your brain, whether it's shifting your mindset, giving yourself new ideas, reading biographies. There's just so much out there. And I think there's a lot of negativity out there. And we really need to be guardians of our brain and making sure we're being intentional about what we're surrounding ourselves by. So putting on maybe not so sexy headphones like this and getting your life, whatever you're doing during your day, and listening to audiobooks of all sorts is a really powerful way to continue your education.
I love it. I could not agree more. Being a sales guy for 25 years, I spent a lot of windshield time, which obviously in LA, all about windshield time. The single greatest thing I ever did was get a Audible subscription and buying tons and tons. You said books on tape, which is so funny. A lot of the younger folks don't even know what tapes are, right? But anyway, that's great.
Showing my age.
Any particular books in the last year or so, or 6 months or something? Anything recent that you've really liked?
Yes, I'm looking over to the side to see if I have it right next to me. I don't think that I do. Oh, I do. So I'm reading. It's a little beat up. Oh, you can't. I'm out of focus. It's called "You're a Badass" by Jen Sincero, and you're a badass at making money. It's part mindset. I know it sounds a little hokey, but it is a lot about mindset and these unconscious thoughts that all of us have that are programmed into us from usually a very young age that we may not be aware of, that control our actions. So if you're bumping yourself up against a wall, trying to make things happen, and it's not happening, it very well may be all these unconscious thoughts that you're having, which are a lot more abundant than our conscious thoughts, that are kind of steering the ship without you realizing it.
I love it. I love it. And they say it's not the things you don't know that kill you. It's the things you know for sure that just aren't true that hurt you the most. Right. So
mic drop. That's a good one.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so here's kind of a fun one. If you had $100,000 to invest today, what would you do with it?
Do I have to invest in real estate or
anything you want? Anything you want.
I would invest in a charity. I've got 2 charities that mean a lot to me. I mentioned the medication that was a miracle drug for me that helped me 4 years ago. 10% of people with cystic fibrosis don't benefit from that drug. And I think about these people every day, what it must be like to still suffer from this awful disease, knowing that plenty of other people are off living their best life because they're a lot healthier and they're left behind. It eats away at me. So there's this organization called Emily's Entourage where we're trying to find medication for the last 10% of people with the illness. And that would be my investment in other people in my tribe that deserve to live long, healthy life like I am.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And I wasn't expecting that type of response, but that is fantastic. Thank you for that.
Of course.
Okay, so maybe another fun one here. If you had, or have you recently, or are you hoping to check a bucket list item off your bucket list?
Oh my gosh. That's a great question. I am obsessed with international travel. I feel closest to God when I'm around people that aren't like me, cultures that are different than me, sights and sounds that are different than me. My amazing husband has only been out of the country once. It was a quick jaunt up to Vancouver, Canada, which, Canada, America, Junior. No, I'm just kidding. But, very similar culturally. But I can't wait to travel to Europe with him, hopefully this fall, and see travel and new experiences through his beginner eyes of traveling. He's a very curious, open-minded, fun-loving man. And I think the experience of travel and living it through him for the first time will be incredible. So that's definitely a bucket list item for me that's coming up.
Fantastic. That is my most recent ones, and future ones as well is always always travel related. So yeah, very good.
Oh, cool.
Well, very good. So yeah, I'm curious. Can you share with the audience how they can get connected with you or Emily's Entourage, or what's the best ways to find you?
Thank you. Thank you. As you mentioned, I'm very active on LinkedIn. I post daily. I try to give massive amounts of education. So if you can remember how to spell my last name, or maybe Randy will put it in the show notes, you can look me up on LinkedIn. I also have a website. Yeah, Sylvis Capital. If you put a /webinar, we've got an educational webinar that talks a bit more about how we think about passively investing in real estate and a little bit more about ourselves. So you can check that out as well.
Fantastic. Well, this has been so much fun, Amy. You've got such great energy, and what an amazing story to go from the challenges you had with health to finding passive and now active income. And you can tell, as I mentioned numerous times, this heart of an educator and a trainer and inspire. Just super fun having you on. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Oh, you're great, Randy. Thank you so much. What a privilege. I appreciate you.
Awesome. All right. And to the audience, as always, thank you so much for joining us today. We encourage you to continue that education process. And more importantly than that, we encourage you to take the step in investing in your first deal. I am so confident that once you do, you will wish that you had started years and years before down that path to decrease your dependence on your W-2. So thank you again so much for being with us here today. And we'll look forward to another great episode next Thursday.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, another episode of The Gentle Art of Crushing It. It was an amazing episode. We know we sure learned a lot, and we hope you did as well. We want to take a second and thank you so much for viewing or listening to this episode. And please just know that we only ask for one favor, and that is to make this life magnificent. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.